Hey friends, Justin here with a review of the 1989 native film Powwow Highway. It stars A. Martinez, the great Gary Farmer, and Amanda Weiss. Um, First, I want to say the score of this film was awesome. It was a mix of native music, rock and roll, and 80s new wave and synth. uh, a really amazing score that I'd love to, have the music for. There were beautiful locales and scenery, to see the Northwest of the United States, even in the snowy parts, all the way down to Santa Fe. It's a part of America that a lot of us outsiders don't get to see often. Kind of the raw America. The acting is wonderful in this film. I'd say Gary Farmer, as usual, is on another level than everyone else. The things that he can do with his face, what he can convey just with his expressions, are just awesome. And what I love about this film, I'm being introduced to indigenous and native film, is that intangible thing that really great indigenous films can do, and that is um, tell a political story, tell a great, obvious story, and then a political story underneath that becomes more obvious and apparent as the film goes along. The film is about a way of life being taken away from people actively. We think that the war was lost 170 years ago, 200 years ago. But in some places, and this was, 30 years ago, but in some places of the United States, that war, that deception still continues. And, this film is a great representation of that. Um, this film was about how to come to terms with the tradition of your people, how to become a warrior, and this was what was important to me. How to become a warrior when you are vastly outnumbered, when the proverbial war is all but lost. What uh, what good is there in still becoming a warrior, in still following that tradition when things seem hopeless? And this movie was beautiful, and it made me cry in certain places. It made me really think in other places. But Gary Farmer is operating. He's on a spiritual journey. Philbert. He is looking for his steed, his pony, to go out and gather good medicine, to find what is going to make him worthy or worth being a warrior. And Red Bow's sister is arrested. Let me take a step back. So, what I mean about the war still being raged is that, politics has come to the reservation. There's a vote coming up as to whether to sign over some rights of the land over to the government. And the government has sent a native person, Mr. Youngblood, I think, onto the reservation to try to convince those natives to sign over their rights. It's going to bring jobs. It's going to bring money. It's going to bring this into the community, as Youngblood says. And Red Bow stands up and says, I've read the contract. I've read every contract from 1830 or whatever he says up till now. And what I see when I look out at the reservation is poverty, is hopelessness, is drunkenness, is broken promises. And what about that? And, Youngblood says that's not statistically true. Our records are public. The contract is public. and basically lying and swindling this man. What's really going on in the undercurrent is that the government is aware of, and they see the power and the influence of Redbow. They understand that he's a cultural leader, more so than even he sees. And that it was really touching to me, about the negative messaging that we give to natives and minorities and folks of influence and power in this country. But they see that he's got the ability to shake the vote and change the way that things are going. And so they arrest his sister down in New Mexico to get him off of the res for a few days until the vote happens. He takes the bait. I mean, he's going to go and protect and save his sister. So he and Philbert set off on a journey to New Mexico to bail or to release Bonnie from jail. She's being held over the Christmas holiday. Her children are in a juvenile facility, and they take off. Philbert has bought what appears to me to be the worst car on the car lot. But there's something in, and forgive me if this is a bad word, but there's something in the omens. There's something in something that he's being told that says, that's the one. That's my steed. That's my pony. And he picks out a car, and by God, that car got all the way there. Do you know what I mean? There were times they drove through blizzards. They drove through incredible places. And I said, that car is just not going to make it. How? How on earth is that car going to make it? But, they take a detour, I think, on a CB radio one night. Philbert talks to, I think it's Lightfoot, another native who's a driver, and he says, you've got to go to South Dakota. There's the Black Hills. It's one of the most beautiful and sacred places in the United States. And Philbert makes a decision, that he's on a spiritual journey, and makes a detour and heads there. Because of that detour, and it's a beautiful, beautiful vista that that he sees, and he ends up finding, some good medicine, as he calls it. Because of that detour, they go and see a friend of Redbow's, and this new character is really, really interesting. I wrote his name down, but I'm sure I won't be able to find it in time. Wolftooth. They go to Wolftooth's house to dry off after they wade out into the river and chant, which was a beautiful scene. But Wolftooth is tired of the reservation. He's tired of their way of life. It has just drained him of his strength and his pride as a man, and he's ready to go to Denver to live in a condo. And Redbow doesn't understand it. He thinks, and it's really a really interesting contrast, he thinks that Philbert is a fool for holding on to tribal traditions, and he thinks that Wolftooth has given up the fight of the reservation. And he's a hopeless realist, right down the middle. And it's really an interesting contrast. He thinks that he's the one that's keeping up the fight, not realizing that there's something to learn from both of the people around him, both of the influences that come around him. And this is from an outsider's perspective looking in, it may not be necessary to live in abject poverty and misery. And it's also not necessary to give up the traditions of your ancestors and to completely think that it's hopeless and foolish. When they're at the powwow in I think it's Pine Ridge, he's talking to think it's Graham Greene who plays the Vietnam vet, and he says, these folks think a few lousy beads and feathers. Here we are. We're in a gymnasium, and let's go outside and smoke a cigarette, because these folks think a few lousy beads and feathers are culture. And that was a sad moment for me in the film. And, I believe it's Graham Greene, the actual actor, breaks down crying because of the PTSD, because of the condition that he's in. He's no longer able to really take pride in who he is, and breaks down in that moment. And I mean, that actor just blew me away, and that was the moment in the film that I really just sobbed. Not sobbed, but I did shed a tear, just to see someone's humanity. And he tells Redbow, no, I haven't, even in the condition that I'm in, I haven't given up on who we are as a people, and go dance, and Redbow, goes down and dances in the powwow, and both him and Philbert participate, and it was really touching to me to see kind of a full circle moment, and him getting strength from those things that, you have to draw strength from: your family, your tradition, the pride that sustained generations before. They stop at a rest stop, and Philbert is telling stories about, I think it's the skin changer. And Redbow says, you're telling fairy tales. This is useless. He's still in that hopeless mindset. And Philbert says, no, these are the stories of our ancestors. And what I know is that, the only thing that changes is time. Problems don't change. People don't change. These stories can still inform us, even at this late date. And Redbow is of the understanding that the fight is lost. There's nothing more to gain. That scene towards the beginning when Philbert goes to see Aunt Harriet to ask her, some wisdom from the elders, and she just laughs and laughs and says, basically, look at me. I'm in poverty. We've lost the fight. I've never had any Indian wisdom. And I thought it was silly at first, but I noticed that Philbert never lost his smile. He never lost hope in gaining something wise from what she had to say, even in her brokenness. I could go on and on and on, but there were so many lessons, and the story was so beautifully told. I'm grateful. A friend of mine here on YouTube named Movie Ninja, I'll link his channel below. He puts out some really, really cool content. He recommended that I watch this after I reviewed Smoke Signals a few weeks back. And I really love this. Gary Farmer is one of my favorite actors. And, I think, I wish he had, I wish he received and receives more recognition than he has. But again, the score was moving, just really great, late 80s music. Really well shot. It was funny. It was, and at the same time, informative. And it's a movie that a lot of people should see. I mean, it was made in 1989, and so I'm on a kick of watching a lot of old movies before too much time has passed and you can't really appreciate them the way that you once could. It's just like with Jurassic Park. One day the effects aren't going to look as good as they still do, 20, 30 years on. You can still watch that movie and still be on the edge of your seat. But in 20 years, when effects go further and further, movies like that and The Lord of the Rings, we won't be able to appreciate because we'll be so taken out by the weird effects. But this movie was, Powwow Highway was a timeless story, and I'm grateful that I watched it. When was the last time you guys have ever watched Powwow Highway, if you have? What are some other Gary Farmer films that you can recommend? Really loved this one, and I'm hungry for more. As always, guys, give this video a like if you will, a comment down in the description and down in the comments, and please subscribe to my channel for more movie and TV related content. I'll see you soon. Cheers.